November the 12th, 1943. The air over RAF Skelton is brittle with frost, a razor's edge against the lungs. It clings to the metal skin of the Avro Lancaster, call sign Valkyrie, making the bomber seem like a creature of the ice it is destined to fly towards. Inside the briefing room, the air is thick with smoke, sweat, and the low hum of anxiety. 7 men, boys forged into instruments of war, watch a pointer trace a red line across a map of Norway. A target deep within a fjord, a heavy water facility critical to the enemy's most terrifying ambition. They are to be the scalpel in the dark. The mission is audacious, a low-level flight through some of the most treacherous terrain and heavily defended airspace in the world. Their faces, illuminated by the single overhead lamp, are a study in practiced composure. Flight Lieutenant Alistair Finch, the pilot, the skipper, is 24 years old, but his eyes hold the ancient weariness of a man who has flown too many missions, seen too many friends not return. He is their anchor, his calm, a tangible force field against the fear that licks at the edges of the room. Beside him, Flying Officer Thomas Grant, the navigator, makes his meticulous calculations, his pencil moving with a surgeon's precision. He is the mind of the operation, the man who will thread the needle through the black heart of the mountains. The rest of the crew, a constellation of specialized skill, orbit these two suns. Sergeant Miller, the flight engineer, a man who knows the Lancaster's 4 Merlin engines better than he knows his own wife's face, his hands permanently stained with oil and grease. The bomb aimer, Pilot Officer Reese, whose steady hands will release 4 tons of oblivion. The gunners, posted like sentinels in their icy turrets, and Sergeant Evan Davies, the wireless operator. At 19, he is the youngest, his face still holding the soft contours of youth. He clutches a worn photograph of a girl in his pocket, a silent promise to return. They are a self-contained universe, a brotherhood sealed within an aluminum shell, held together by trust, training, and the unspoken acknowledgement of their shared mortality. The briefing concludes, chairs scrape, a final cup of tea scalding and sweet. Letters are handed to a waiting adjutant, letters filled with mundane news and profound, unwritten love, to be sent only if they fail to return. They walk out into the unforgiving English night, their footsteps crunching on the frozen ground. The Valkyrie waits, immense and silent, its propellers still. They ascend the ladder, each man touching a small lucky charm painted on the fuselage, a winged Norse maiden. One by one, they disappear into the belly of the beast. The pre-flight checks are a litany, a ritual chanted in the cold. Finch's voice over the intercom, calm, clipped, reassuring. The engines cough, sputter, then roar to life, a symphony of controlled power that vibrates through the very bones of the earth. The ground crew gives the thumbs up, their faces indistinct in the gloom. Finch's hands move over the controls with an intimacy born of countless hours. The Lancaster trundles down the runway, heavy with fuel and purpose. It lifts a slow, grudging ascent, severing its tie to the solid world. It banks over the coast, a dark cross against a darker sea, and sets its course for Norway, for the mountains that wait, patient and eternal, for a fate that history has yet to write. They are 7 men flying into a legend, swallowed by the vast, indifferent sky. Their last view of England is a string of fading lights, a final, fragile connection to a life they may never see again. The long silence is about to begin. The North Sea is a churning expanse of black ink, its surface indistinguishable from the starless sky above. Inside the Lancaster, the world has shrunk to the dim green glow of the instrument panel and the deafening, soul-shaking roar of the 4 Merlin engines. For hours, this is their reality, a pocket of light and sound suspended in an infinite void. Flying Officer Grant, the navigator, is a man bent over a small pool of light, his face a mask of concentration. He works with dividers and protractors, his calculations a constant battle against wind, drift, and the Earth's subtle pull. He is their lifeline, the only man who knows precisely where they are in this featureless emptiness. The rest of the crew are at their stations, locked in a state of heightened waiting. The gunners scan the darkness, their eyes straining for the telltale flicker of a night fighter's exhaust. Every shadow, every cloud, is a potential threat. Sergeant Davies, the radio operator, sits in his own bubble of quiet concentration, his ears tuned to the static, listening for friendly signals, for warnings, for anything that might pierce the profound isolation. Then, through the perspex, they see it. Not a light, but a change in the darkness. A line of deeper black, serrated and monstrous. The coast of Norway, it rises from the sea like the jawbone of some colossal, sleeping beast. They are entering enemy territory. The tension inside the aircraft tightens into a physical thing. Alistair Finch takes the Valkyrie down, dropping her from the relative safety of altitude to hug the treacherous contours of the land. They fly through the fjords, the granite cliffs so close it feels as if they could reach out and touch them. The wings of the Lancaster almost scrape the rock, the roar of its engines echoing back, trapped between the water and the stone. This is where skill transcends training, where instinct and artistry merge. Finch is no longer a man flying a machine. He and the Valkyrie are one entity, a fleeting ghost of metal and wire navigating a maze of ancient rock. Suddenly, the sky erupts. Searchlights lance out from the cliffs, pinning them in cones of brilliant, terrifying white. The world outside the cockpit is no longer dark, but a chaotic lattice of light and shadow. Then comes the flak. Red and white blossoms of death bloom around them, the explosions rocking the bomber violently. The sharp metallic patter of shrapnel striking the fuselage is like hail on a tin roof. Inside, the gunners return fire, their tracers stitching fiery lines into the night, a desperate, defiant answer. Pilot Officer Reese calls out the target, his voice miraculously calm over the intercom amidst the cacophony. "Target acquired, Skipper. Steady, steady." Finch holds the Lancaster level through the storm of steel. A lifetime passes in those few seconds. Then Reese's voice again. "Bombs gone!" The aircraft leaps upwards, suddenly lighter, freed of its deadly cargo. Finch throws the Valkyrie into a steep banking turn, pulling them away from the heart of the inferno. Below, a series of catastrophic explosions illuminates the fjord, a man-made sunrise that silhouettes their fleeing aircraft. They have done it, but the cost is high. A violent shudder runs through the plane. Sergeant Miller's voice, tight with strain, cuts through the intercom. "Starboard outer engine is gone, Skipper. We're losing oil pressure on the inner, too." They are wounded, bleeding hydraulic fluid and fuel into the Arctic night. They are losing altitude, the remaining engines screaming in protest as they struggle to keep the heavy bomber airborne. Davies tries to send a message, a frantic series of Morse code dots and dashes. His transmission is a garbled cry for help, slashed to pieces by enemy jamming and the failing systems of his own aircraft. The last coherent fragment picked up by a listening post in the Shetland Islands is a call sign, a partial coordinate, and the single word, falling. Then nothing, just the hiss of static. The Valkyrie, mortally wounded, disappears from the map, from the war, from the world. It vanishes into the vast, snow-choked wilderness of the Lingen Alps, a place where the mountains touch the sky and secrets are kept for generations. On the mission board back at RAF Skelton, a single stark notation is made beside their names, "Failed to return." History closes the book on the 7 men of the Valkyrie. The mountain, however, has just opened its own. For 78 years, the silence is absolute. The war ends in a tide of victory and relief. But for a handful of families in quiet corners of Britain, the peace is forever incomplete. A telegram arrives, a sterile bureaucratic expression of regret from the king. It speaks of sacrifice, of duty, of a debt that can never be repaid. But it offers no answers, no crash site, no wreckage, no bodies to mourn. The 7 men of the Valkyrie are simply gone, swallowed whole by the war, their final moments an unfillable void. Their names are carved into stone memorials, joining the silent legions of the lost. They become photographs on mantelpieces, their youthful faces frozen in time, their smiles a constant, painful reminder of what was and what might have been. A wife grows old, never remarrying. A mother keeps her son's room exactly as he left it, a shrine of arrested time. A younger sister, the recipient of Evan Davies's last cheerful letter about the camp's terrible food, reads it over and over until the paper is soft and the ink has faded, searching for a clue, a premonition that was never there. In Norway, in the small, isolated communities that lie in the shadow of the Lyngen Alps, the story of the ghost plane becomes a part of the local folklore. On nights when the wind howls down from the peaks, old fishermen claim to hear the faint, struggling drone of Merlin engines. Children whisper stories of a great silver bird that fell from the sky and was devoured by the Storglasiaren, the great glacier, a slow-moving river of ice that grinds continents to dust and holds its prisoners forever. Official searches are conducted in the months and years after the war. RAF reconnaissance planes fly grids over the suspected crash area. Norwegian mountain rescue teams, hardy men who know the terrain intimately, scan the vast white emptiness. They find nothing. Not a scrap of metal, not a shred of uniform, not a single trace of the 4-engine bomber or its crew. The landscape is too vast, too brutal. The winter snows are too deep, covering any evidence within hours, entombing it under layers of fresh powder that will, over decades, compact into glacial ice. The official file is stamped closed. The case of Lancaster Valkyrie is consigned to the archives, a cold statistical entry in the ledger of war's immense cost. The world moves on. The Cold War rises and falls. Nations are rebuilt. Generations are born who know of the great conflict only through history books and films. The glacier continues its inexorable, imperceptible journey down the mountain valley. It carries the secret of the Valkyrie deep within its frozen heart. The ice acts not as a destroyer, but as a custodian. It holds the final chapter of the crew's story in perfect crystalline suspension, protecting it from the ravages of time, waiting for a moment, decades in the future, when the world will have changed enough to force it to speak. The mountain watches, the ice preserves, the silence endures, a profound and heavy weight, covering the truth like a shroud of endless snow. The mystery deepens with each passing year, until the men themselves are more myth than memory, their fate a question whispered only by the wind that scours the high, lonely peaks. The summer of 2021 is unnaturally warm. A relentless, patient heat settles over the Arctic Circle, a fever in the ancient ice. In the Lyngen Alps of northern Norway, the glaciers are weeping. Rivers of meltwater, milky with suspended rock flour, carved new channels through the frozen landscape. The Storglasiaren, the great glacier that has held its silence for millennia, is retreating at a rate that alarms scientists and astonishes the locals. Its long, icy tongue is pulling back, exposing bedrock that has not seen sunlight since the last ice age. It is here, on the newly bared moraine at the glacier's snout, that Dr. Anja Sharma, a glaciologist from the Arctic University of Norway, is conducting her research. She is charting the death of a giant, measuring its decline with GPS trackers and ice-penetrating radar. Her work is precise, methodical, a clinical documentation of climate change's inexorable march. One afternoon, while checking a monitoring station, something catches her eye. It is not the subtle shift of rock or the glint of mica in the granite. It is something wrong, something profoundly out of place in this landscape of stone and ice. A flash of dull, olive-green metal wedged between two enormous boulders recently deposited by the melting ice. Her first thought is that it is modern debris, discarded camping equipment perhaps. But as she gets closer, her scientific curiosity sharpens into a different kind of feeling, a prickling sense of historical gravity. The object is a canister, roughly the size of a large suitcase, its shape vaguely familiar from old war documentaries. It is heavily dented, scarred by an unimaginable journey through the grinding, crushing interior of the glacier. But its seams remarkably appear to be intact. It is an RAF Type C supply container, an artifact from another era, airdropped to resistance fighters or carried on board bombers for survival. Sharma feels a chill that has nothing to do with the surrounding ice. She knows the local legends. She knows the history of this region, a silent battlefield in a global war. Her fingers, trembling slightly, trace the stenciled lettering still faintly visible on its side. Val. The rest of the word is scoured away by time and ice, but it is enough. She immediately calls her team, her voice hushed with a reverence she cannot explain. The process of extracting the canister is one of painstaking archaeological care. They use small picks and brushes, treating the surrounding ice and rock as if it were a fragile tomb. The container is heavy, impossibly so. It is not empty. As they finally lift it free from the grip of the moraine, the sense of touching the past is overwhelming. This object has been locked in a frozen, timeless state while the world outside spun through nearly 8 decades of history. It has been carried for miles, slowly, relentlessly, by the river of ice, from a place high up on the mountain, a place of impact, a place where a story ended, or perhaps where a new one began. The canister is carefully transported by helicopter to the university in Tromsø. It sits in a climate-controlled laboratory, a silent, battered messenger from 1943. What secrets does it hold? What was so important that a crew, in their final desperate moments, would ensure its survival? The initial assumption that this was merely part of the bomber's scattered wreckage begins to crumble. The container was found far from any plausible crash site on the fjord-facing slopes. It was found on the inland side of the Great Mountain Divide. It was on a trajectory that made no sense for a plane trying to return to Britain. It was on a path that led east toward Sweden. The 78-year silence is broken, not by a roar, but by the quiet, momentous discovery of a single sealed metal box. The laboratory at the University of Tromsø is a sterile, modern space, a world of clean steel and humming computers. In its center sits the canister, an anomaly of rust and age. A team of experts has been assembled: historians, forensic specialists, conservators, and military archivists. The air is thick with a unique kind of tension, a blend of scientific anticipation and historical reverence. They are about to open a time capsule, a message in a bottle cast into an ocean of ice. The process of opening the container is agonizingly slow. The locking mechanisms are rusted solid, fused by decades of pressure and cold. A specialized technician uses a micro saw, cutting with millimeter precision to preserve the integrity of the canister and its contents. Every person in the room holds their breath as the lid is finally pried open. There is a faint hiss, the sound of air from 1943, mingling with the air of the 21st century. The first thing they notice is the smell. It is the scent of oilskin, old canvas, and something else, something fainter, the ghost of aviation fuel and cold metal. A conservator, wearing white gloves, reaches inside. The contents are packed with military precision, a testament to the discipline of the men who last touched them. Each item is carefully removed, photographed, and laid out on a sterile white table. The artifacts begin to tell a story. There is the standard issue survival gear, a Webley flare pistol, its metal pitted, but its mechanism still functional. a box of waterproof matches, blocks of high-energy Kendal mint cake, a taste of the English lakes in the heart of the Arctic. A first aid kit, remarkably well preserved. Inside, glass vials of morphine are still intact, their contents sterile, a small mercy that was never used. There are personal items, small, heartbreaking anchors to the lives these men lived. A tattered paperback copy of Moby Dick, its pages warped by moisture, a bookmark still resting halfway through the novel. A set of silver cufflinks engraved with the initials AF, Alistair Finch. A small, intricately carved wooden bird, clearly the work of a patient, whittling hand. These objects humanize them, transforming them from names on a list into tangible individuals. Then the conservator lifts out a large oilskin-wrapped bundle from the bottom of the canister. This is the heart of the discovery. The package is carefully unwrapped layer by layer. Inside, protected from the worst of the moisture, are 3 items. First, a bundle of letters tied with a piece of string. They are addressed to wives, mothers, and sweethearts. These are not the letters left with the adjutant before the mission. These were written after the crash. Second, a standard RAF navigator's logbook, its cover stiff, its pages filled with neat, precise handwriting. It is a journal. And third, a single, folded piece of paper. It is not a military chart. It is a page torn from a common school atlas, the kind of map a boy might have used to learn geography. But this page has been heavily annotated in pencil. It shows the border region between Norway and Sweden. A faint, deliberate line has been drawn on it, a line that starts high in the Lingen Alps and snakes its way eastward through impossible terrain towards the promise of neutrality. The forensic reconstruction can now begin in earnest. The initial theory, that this was simply debris from a catastrophic crash, is now completely discarded. This canister was not jettisoned by chance. It was deliberately packed. The items inside were selected. This was a survival kit for a long journey. The presence of the journal and the newly written letters confirms it. At least some of the crew of the Valkyrie survived the end of their flight. They came down from the sky, not in a fireball of oblivion, but in a controlled descent into a world of white. And in that desolate wilderness, faced with impossible odds, they did not surrender to despair. They made a plan. The map shows their desperate, audacious gamble. The journal, they hope, will tell them how it unfolded. The leather-bound logbook is placed under a digital scanner, its fragile pages handled with the gentle precision of a bomb disposal expert. The handwriting inside belongs to Flying Officer Thomas Grant, the navigator. His script is small, neat, and astonishingly steady, a testament to a mind that finds order even in the midst of chaos. The narrator's voice, solemn and clear, begins to read the first entry, a bridge of words across 78 years of silence. November 13th, 1943. If anyone is reading this, then we have failed. But we did not fail in our duty. The target was destroyed. The cost, however, was our aircraft. We lost the starboard engines over the target fjord. Finch, damn his eyes, is the finest pilot I have ever seen. He flew a crippled bird for nearly 50 miles, clearing the highest peaks before finding this plateau. He put the Valkyrie down on her belly. A controlled crash, a miracle of airmanship. The landing was violent, but the fuselage held. All 7 of us are alive. Miller has a broken arm, Davies, the lad, a nasty gash on his head, but he is coherent. The rest of us are bruised, battered, but functional. God is merciful. The entry paints a vivid picture that shatters every official assumption. There was no explosion. There was no fiery plunge into a rocky fjord. There was a moment of supreme skill, a pilot wrestling his dying machine onto a high, frozen tableland, saving the lives of his crew. The journal continues, chronicling their first 24 hours in this alien world. The cold is a physical entity. It bites and claws. We have salvaged what we could from the wreck. rations, medical supplies, the survival canister. The radio is a mangled wreck, utterly useless. We are cut off from the world. Finch held a meeting. Our position is perilous. We are high, perhaps 5,000 feet. To the west, the coast, and the Germans. A trek in that direction would be suicide. They would find us within days. To the east, the map is our only guide. Sweden, neutrality, freedom. It is over 100 miles of what appears to be the most unforgiving terrain on God's earth. But it is our only hope. The consensus was immediate. We walk east. The forensic team cross-references Grant's descriptions with modern topographical data. They pinpoint the likely location of the crash, a vast high-altitude plateau known as the Finnmarksvidda, a place where even in summer the conditions are brutal. In November, it would have been a landscape of profound hostility, with temperatures dropping to 30 or 40 degrees below zero, relentless winds, and near-perpetual twilight. Grant's entries for the following days detail their preparations. They are methodical, professional. They are not panicked survivors. They are a military unit adapting to a new, unconventional battlefield. Miller, despite his arm, has fashioned crude snowshoes from salvaged aluminum and wiring. Reese, our bomb aimer, has proven an expert with a compass. Finch leads, as always, his resolve a shield against the encroaching despair. We have pooled our rations. The inventory is grim, with strict rationing, perhaps 10 days' worth of food. The journey, we estimate, will take at least twice that. We will have to hunt, to forage. How in this white desert I do not know. Young Davies is trying to keep spirits up. He tells terrible jokes. We laugh, perhaps too loudly. It is a small act of defiance against the silence. The journal reveals the inner state of the men. They are pragmatists, fully aware of the odds stacked against them. Yet there is no hint of surrender. There is a current of determined, almost stubborn hope running through Grant's precise prose. The final entry written from the crash site is filled with a somber sense of finality and purpose. November 16, 1943. We leave at first light. We have packed the canister with our letters and this log. We will carry it for as long as we are able, a record of our endeavor. If we cannot carry it further, we will find a place to leave it, a marker, a testament. We are leaving the Valkyrie behind, our silver ghost on the ice. She brought us through the fire and delivered us alive to this place. Now we must walk out of our own tomb. We walk towards Sweden. We walk towards home. May God have mercy on our souls. The team in the lab sits in stunned silence. The narrative is no longer about a mysterious disappearance. It is now one of the most remarkable survival stories of the Second World War. A story of 7 men who survived a crash only to face an even greater challenge, a 100-mile trek through the Arctic wilderness in the heart of winter. The question is no longer what happened to the Lancaster. The question is now, what happened to the men? The annotated page from the school atlas is laid out under high-resolution cameras. It is a document of desperate hope, a fragile paper talisman against a continent of ice. Thomas Grant's penciled line is not straight. It curves and winds, a navigator's careful attempt to plot a path of least resistance through a landscape he has only ever seen from 20,000 feet, or on a rudimentary map. It follows the deep valleys, skirts the highest peaks, and aims for the lowest passes. It is a route born of intelligence and instinct, but it is also a route of profound peril. Military survival experts and Norwegian mountaineers are brought in to analyze the plan. Their assessment is grim. The route would force the men to cross several frozen rivers, navigate through avalanche-prone valleys, and ascend to passes where the wind and cold would be at their most ferocious. For 7 men, some injured, with inadequate clothing and dwindling rations, the chances of success were, in the experts' clinical judgment, close to 0. The letters, which had been carefully dried and conserved, provide the next layer of revelation. They are not simple farewells. Each one contains coded phrases, family inside jokes, and seemingly innocuous references that, to an outsider, would mean nothing. The team suspects these are more than just sentimental messages. They bring in a retired cryptographer from GCHQ, a man who spent his career deciphering Cold War secrets. He looks at the letter from young Evan Davies to his sister, a seemingly rambling note about their childhood dog, a shared love of crossword puzzles, and a specific chess game they once played. The cryptographer recognizes the patterns immediately. It is a book cipher, a simple but effective code, with the key being a book they both knew intimately. The team searches the canister's contents again. Moby Dick. It is the key. The cryptographer sets to work, cross-referencing numbers and words from the letter with page, line, and word counts in the novel. The deciphered message begins to emerge, and it is a revelation of the crew's strategic state of mind. Dearest Sarah, the decoded message reads, plan is to walk east. 115 miles to Swedish border. Avoid coast at all costs. German patrols too numerous. Finch believes our best chance is the Kolin mountain range, following the river valleys when possible. Miller's arm is set. My head is clear. Spirits are high. We are airmen. We are not beaten. Tell Mother I love her. Do not grieve. We will make it. This is not a message of despair. It is an intelligence report, a strategic summary smuggled out under the guise of a love letter. It confirms their calculated decision-making. They were not wandering aimlessly. They were executing a survival plan with military precision. They understood the tactical situation on the ground better than anyone had ever given them credit for. They knew the Germans would be searching the coast, the logical escape route. So they chose the illogical, the impossible. They chose the mountains. The combination of the map, the journal, and the coded letters elevates their story from one of tragic victims to one of proactive, intelligent protagonists. They were fighting a new war, not against flak and fighters, but against the elements, cold, starvation, and the vast, crushing indifference of the Arctic wilderness. They were using their skills, the navigator's planning, the pilot's leadership, the radio operator's ingenuity, to give themselves a fighting chance. The weight of their endeavor settles upon the modern-day investigators. These 7 men were not just hoping to survive. They were executing a mission, their final mission, and the canister, with its precious contents, was their final log, their last report, left behind for a future they were not sure they would live to see. The decision is made. They will follow the map. They will retrace the ghost's trail. A team is assembled, a fusion of modern science and historical empathy. Dr. Anya Sharma, the glaciologist who found the canister, her knowledge of the shifting ice now crucial. Major Lars Eriksson, a veteran of the Norwegian Armed Forces and a respected military historian, his expertise in Arctic survival providing a grim context for the crew's journey. And a small team of mountain rescue specialists. They are equipped with 21st century technology, GPS, satellite phones, thermal drones, and high-performance cold weather gear. Their mission is to walk the same path as the crew of the Valkyrie, to see what they saw, to feel a fraction of what they must have felt. They begin at the crash site, pinpointed by Grant's journal and confirmed by aerial radar scans that show a large metallic anomaly buried under decades of snow and ice. The plateau is a desolate, wind-scoured place. Standing there, the modern team is silenced by the sheer scale of the crew's predicament. The emptiness is absolute. There is no shelter, no life, only rock, snow, and sky. From here, Grant's penciled line on the atlas page is their only guide. They follow the ghost trail. The narration constantly juxtaposes the two journeys, separated by 78 years. The modern team travels in the relative safety of late summer, with long days and manageable temperatures. The Valkyrie crew traveled in the perpetual twilight of the polar night, in the teeth of the Arctic winter. The modern team has lightweight tents and high-calorie rations. The crew had salvaged aircraft canvas and a handful of chocolate bars. Lars Eriksson points out the challenges with a soldier's pragmatism. "Here," he says, pointing to a wide, fast-flowing river, "they would have had to cross." The journal mentions building a crude raft from wreckage. The water temperature would have been just above freezing. Hypothermia would set in within minutes. To survive that crossing would have required incredible fortitude. Days into the trek, they find their first piece of corroborating evidence. Tucked into a small rock overhang, a natural shelter, a member of the team finds a small, rust-eaten tin. It is a World War II RAF issue ration tin. It has been opened, its contents long gone. It is a tiny, insignificant piece of rubbish, yet its presence here, on this exact route, is a thunderous confirmation. They are on the right path. The men of the Valkyrie were here. They rested in this spot. They shared a meager meal, trying to replenish the thousands of calories their bodies were burning just to stay alive. The journey becomes a pilgrimage. The team members speak in hushed tones, as if afraid of disturbing the spirits of the men they are following. The landscape, which at first seemed merely beautiful and remote, now feels charged with history and pathos. It is the antagonist of the story, a living, breathing entity that the crew had to fight every step of the way. Dr. Sharma uses ground-penetrating radar on the small glaciers that fill the high valleys along the route. She is looking for anomalies, for anything that the ice might have swallowed and preserved. In one narrow pass, the radar shows a small, dense object a few feet below the surface. After carefully digging through the compacted snow and ice, they unearth a single leather flying boot. It is frozen solid, the laces still tied. There is no sign of its owner. It is a poignant, solitary clue. Had he lost it in a fall? Or had it been removed from a man who could walk no further? The question hangs in the frigid air, unanswered. They find other traces, small breadcrumbs on a 78-year-old trail, a series of notches carved into a birch tree, a navigator's way of marking a path, a single tarnished brass button from an RAF tunic lying on a bed of moss near a place that might have been a campsite. Each discovery is a jolt, a direct physical link to the crew. It transforms them from historical figures into men of flesh and blood, men who struggled, who shivered, who bled on this very ground. The trail is leading them higher, further into the mountains, towards the Swedish border, towards a final high pass known in local Sami folklore as Skarasgaisi, the Widow's Gate. It is a place of sudden, violent storms, a place from which travelers sometimes do not return. The approach to the Widow's Gate is the most difficult part of the journey. The modern team faces driving winds and sudden snow squalls, even in late summer. For the Valkyrie crew, in the depths of winter, it would have been a vision of hell. The pass is a narrow notch between two towering, ice-sheathed peaks. The wind howls through it with the sound of a grieving chorus. It is here, just below the crest of the pass, that the team makes its final, most significant discovery. Tucked against a sheer rock face, protected from the worst of the prevailing winds, are the remains of a shelter. It is more than just a simple bivouac. It is a carefully constructed stone wall, about 3 feet high, built to deflect the wind. Salvage pieces of the Lancaster's aluminum skin were used to create a rudimentary roof, now collapsed and buried under snow. This was a place where the crew made a stand. They did not die scattered and lost in a blizzard. They died together, organized to the very end. Forensic archaeologists are flown in. The site is carefully excavated. What they find tells the final, heartbreaking chapter of the story. They find the remains of 5 men within the shelter. The other 2 are found nearby, at the base of a steep cliff. The initial assumption is that they fell, but the forensic evidence suggests something else entirely. The remains inside the shelter are huddled together, as if for warmth. Near them are the last of their belongings, the empty ration tins, the carved wooden bird, the flare pistol, unfired. The two men outside the shelter, identified by dental records and surviving insignia as Flight Lieutenant Alistair Finch, the pilot, and Sergeant Miller, the flight engineer, had with them the only climbing rope and a small makeshift ice axe fashioned from a piece of the landing gear. The team finds the final pages of Thomas Grant's journal tucked into a waterproof pouch on his body. The last entry is dated December 22nd, 1943. The handwriting is shaky. The pencil strokes faint, but the words are clear. Snowed in for 2 weeks. The blizzard is relentless. Rations gone days ago. We have burned the last of the wooden bird for a moment's warmth. The cold is deep in our bones now. We are so close. Sweden is just over this ridge. 10 miles, maybe less. But it might as well be the moon. Davies is the weakest. The boy is fading. Finch has a plan. A last gamble. The forensic reconstruction pieces together that final plan. Finch and Miller, the two strongest remaining, had taken the rope and axe in an attempt to climb the final ridge to get a view, to find a way down, to go for help. They were roped together. The evidence shows their anchor point gave way. They fell. It was an accident born of heroic desperation. The 5 men left in the shelter would have known what had happened. They would have heard the fall or simply seen that their leaders did not return. They were trapped, their last hope gone. Grant's final, barely legible sentence in the journal is not one of despair, but of profound duty and love. We have given the last of our warmth, our blankets, to the boy. It is all we have left to give. He is 19. Tell them we were brothers. The evidence confirms it. The remains of Evan Davies are found in the most sheltered part of the structure, wrapped in the remnants of several flight jackets. The other 4 men were huddled around him, their bodies forming a final, futile shield against the cold. The forensic twist is complete. This was not a story of a failed escape. It was a story of managed, ordered sacrifice. They faced the end not in panic or disarray, but with the same discipline and camaraderie with which they flew their bomber. In their final moments, their mission was no longer to get to Sweden. Their mission was to protect the youngest member of their crew, to give a boy of 19 a few more hours of life, a final desperate act of grace in a place devoid of any. The mystery of the Valkyrie is solved. The men faced their end not as victims of the mountain, but as captains of their own souls, defiant to the last. The silence that follows the discovery at the Widow's Gate is one of profound, sorrowful understanding. The story, held for 78 years by the ice, is finally complete. The news is released to the world, and the tale of the 7 men of the Valkyrie captivates millions. They are no longer a footnote in the casualty lists of a long-forgotten mission. They are heroes of a story of survival and sacrifice that transcends the war itself. The most poignant part of the closure comes for the families. The descendants of the crew, grandchildren and great-nieces and nephews who grew up with the faded photographs and the lingering mystery, are brought together in Tromsø. They are shown the artifacts from the canister, the personal items that connect them directly to the men they never knew. They hold Alistair Finch's silver cufflinks. They touch the small wooden bird carved by Sergeant Miller. They read the conserved pages of Thomas Grant's journal, his steady hand telling the story of their ancestors' final weeks. It is an experience of immense emotional weight, a bridge across generations. The decoded letter from Evan Davies to his sister Sarah is read aloud to his great-niece, a woman now in her 60s. She weeps as she hears the voice of the 19-year-old boy she only knew from family stories. His words of courage and love for his family, finally delivered after nearly 8 decades. "Do not grieve," he had written. "We will make it." In a way, he was right. Their story, their legacy had finally made it home. The remains of the 7 crewmen are recovered from the mountain with full military honors. A joint British and Norwegian operation brings them down from the high pass. In a solemn ceremony, under the gray Norwegian sky, 7 coffins, each draped in a Union Jack, are carried by soldiers from the modern Royal Air Force and the Royal Norwegian Air Force. The sound of a lone trumpet playing the last post echoes through the mountains that were both their tomb and their sanctuary for so long. They are laid to rest together in a military cemetery, their headstones finally bearing their names, ranks, and a date of death, replacing the stark empty words, "missing in action." At the ceremony, Alistair Finch's grandson, a man who bears his grandfather's name, speaks for all the families. "We grew up with ghosts," he says, his voice thick with emotion. "Honorable ghosts, but ghosts nonetheless. Today, you have given them back to us. We now know that they did not die in a moment of violence and fire, but lived for weeks with courage, discipline, and love for one another. They were not just a crew, they were, as their final words stated, brothers. Their last mission was not a failure. Their last mission was to show us the enduring strength of the human spirit." The final scene is one of quiet reflection. The camera pans slowly over the immense, majestic, and unforgiving landscape of the Lingen Alps. The peaks are shrouded in mist, their secrets finally told. The glacier, the great keeper of the story, continues its slow retreat, a symbol of a changing world that can, sometimes, by chance, reveal the unchanging truths of the past. The story of the Valkyrie is no longer a mystery of disappearance, but a testament to endurance. It is a reminder that history is not just a collection of dates and events, but the sum of individual stories of courage, sacrifice, and the profound human need for closure. The 7 men of Lancaster Valkyrie are home. Their long silence is over. They can finally rest, their duty done, their story known, their memory preserved not in ice, but in honor.